God, I wish I had $1 for every time someone has asked me that question. And I never have an answer. I mean, I would say that Louis Armstrong is the be-all and the end-all. And you should certainly listen to something by Armstrong, the 1928 recordings, or one of the great recordings from the 1950s. Of modern jazz, Ellington, certainly there should be an album by Ellington, probably a collection from the early 40s, or maybe a late work like, it's funny, the other night I was listening, just by coincidence, I was listening to Stravinsky's Petrushka, and it reminded me of a piece, The Bird of Delhi, from one movement of it, from Ellington's Far East Suite. And I played Ellington's Far East Suite, a piece I've always loved. And it's greater than I always thought it was great, but it's greater. It's even greater than I thought. I really feel like now I want to write about it in a completely different way. So if you start there, you'll know who Ellington is. It doesn't have to be with Mood Indigo or some, agreed upon, received wisdom masterpiece. Everybody loves Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. So be different. Choose something else like Milestones or My Funny Valentine or, Porgy and Bess. I mean, these are all such magnificent recordings. Monk, I think Solo Monk, nobody can resist Solo Monk. When I was in school, and the one thing that my rock and roll friends who really didn't have any interest in jazz, they all ended up buying Monk. You just can't resist Solo Monk. Nobody can. It's just too happy and swinging and surprising and whimsical and witty and brilliant, and it just makes you think about everything in a different way. That's more than 5 already, I suppose. But one of the things we say in this book is, my job is to be a jazz historian and critic, so I got to listen to everything, but you don't. You may love the swing era. You may get really turned on by Ellington and Basie and Jimmy Lunsford and Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw and Andy Kirk and all these fantastic swing bands. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to love the avant-garde. You may, I think one of the great periods is 1945 to 1949 when bebop was really pure. I'm not aware of a bad record that was made in those 4 years by anybody. But, you may get completely obsessed with that and may find, traditional jazz or swing dull. And then at some point in your life, you may go back to it and say, hey, now I get that. The point is to go with what really turns you on. People should not feel intimidated by received wisdom. You have to discover it yourself. If I tell you that Armstrong is great, it's meaningless. You have to hear it. Every once in a while, I meet somebody who's just had the Armstrong experience, and it's always the same, and I love it. Because at one point you think, well, he's entertaining or he's this or that, but then suddenly they get it the way they get Bach's B minor Mass, which for me was a benchmark as a kid. And suddenly they know that this guy really was God, that there's nothing, Bing Crosby said that Armstrong is the beginning and the end of music in America, and he wasn't far wrong. Ken Burns, when he was making his jazz documentary, I was very cynical about it. He was going around saying he didn't know anything about jazz, but that in a few years he would, and all of this, and I'm thinking it's not that easy. And then I was talking to him, and he had just been converted by Armstrong, and you can't disguise that. He had a glow on about it, and the words he was using, and I thought, brother, he's in the tent, fine.